This is the Torg Eternity Brief Delphi Council Debriefing. Today I am your single host, Leamon Crafton, line developer for Torg Eternity. And what I would like to briefly discuss is some gear versus perk aspects, questions, concerns that have arisen that I've seen multiple people question the rules more than once. So I wanted to go over that. I have two specific examples, and those would be two weapons versus the Path of the Sword from Pan Pacifica, as well as within Pan Pacifica, the Gene Mod Serum Zing versus the perk, the Vitality perk Center Self. So before I get into that, I would like to encourage anyone listening to email me or us, depending if it's a brief Delphi Council debriefing or a full-blown Delphi Council debriefing with Mark and Jay or whatever other hosts may be here. But we will read your email and we will answer any questions that you have, make comments, etc. And that's always good to engage with you, the audience, and the fans of Torg Eternity. So having said that, let's me dive into the first one of these. So in the Torg Eternity core rules on page 126, there is an option, or not an option, I guess it'd be a combat option, of two weapons. And there's one sentence at the beginning talking about melee weapons, and then there's a big paragraph talking about ranged weapons. But we're going to only talk about melee weapons at this point. So the one sentence just says, a character using two melee weapons increases his melee weapons defense by +2. And it's only the melee defense because if you have weapons, you are going to be people are going to use your melee defense as their way to get by you with an attack. Since you have weapons, it's always what the defender has, not what the attacker has, whether it's melee defense, what melee weapons is defense, or unarmed. So for clarification, if I have melee weapons and somebody is attacking me unarmed, I still use melee defense because my defense is based off of my melee weapons, and vice versa. If somebody is using a weapon against me using melee weapons and I am unarmed, I will use my unarmed defense because I don't have any weapons to defend myself. So that's how that works. And this gives you a +2 if you have say two swords in your hands, or a sword and axe, sword and mace, whatever. You will gain a +2 bonus. So kind of clear cut how that works. So if we look at Path of the Sword, the second ability, so for Path of the Sword, you require 3 adds of melee weapons, so you're automatically going to have this as soon as you get Path of the Sword. Your second technique within the path is called Staying Alive, and it says when attacked after the attacker makes an action total, the Sword Master may spend 1 shock to gain a +2 bonus to melee defense. And people, what they read is may spend 1 shock to gain +2 bonus to melee defense, and they think, hey, if I had 2 weapons, I would get that same +2 bonus, and I wouldn't have to spend shock, so what is the point of staying alive? And then a counter is, well, you only need 1 weapon, so if you're in a situation that you can't have 2 weapons, such as you're climbing or hanging on something with one hand and trying to attack or defend with your other hand, you could use this. So that's kind of niche cases. Comes up every once in a while, wouldn't come up enough, I think, for the majority of people to see that as a benefit. It's a situational benefit, not a general benefit. But I think the focus is too much on the staying alive at the back half of the part, which just says spend a shock to gain 2 bonus to melee defense. And the thing that is kind of forgotten about when comparing this, having the 2 weapons as gear versus this being part of a perk, is it says when attacked after the attacker makes an action total, the Sword Master would spend. And why the afters are used is so that the Storm Knight, the player of the Storm Knight, can look at the math and determine whether or not it would be beneficial for them to spend this shock. Spending the shock adding +2 bonus to all all your defenses for the melee round or the round, they would probably be a little more iffy. Am I going to spend this? Am I not? Where if you look at it and you know you spend it, and adding these +2 are going to stop an attack, then you're much more likely to spend it. Okay, so with this, you could use both. And what I mean is, before the roll is done, when you're first calculating that roll for being attacked, or the game master is rolling, they determine everything. They roll their dice, the bonus number, they do whatever special things the villain or the threat might have, they add it all up, then they compare it to your melee defense. So if you have 2 weapons out, and say that you took Path of the Sword, you have 2 weapons out, that +2 is already applied to your melee defense. If it still hits by 1 or 2, you therefore could use Staying Alive to spend that shock and increase it by an additional +2. Now, Leamon, you might say, don't things not stack unless it specifically says that they stack? Yes, but we're talking about everything pre-done bonuses or at the same time bonuses. This is after the effect bonus. This is something that occurs after everything's been taken into place. It's an additional bonus that gets applied. So if I have my 2 weapons already, say I have a katana and a dagger, or 2 katanas, or whatever, I have 2 weapons out, and then I am having that 2 weapons melee defense added, that's already taken into place. I haven't done this Staying Alive technique at all. And then afterwards, once all of those bonuses, they've been dealt with. So I guess a good way to look at it is, has that bonus already been dealt with? So the +2 weapons bonus has already been dealt with to determine that, yes, I'm still being hit by like 1 or 2. If I could increase my defense by 1 or 2, I would actually prevent that being hit. Then I could use Staying Alive, because this bonus hasn't been dealt with. If Staying Alive would have been done previously, yes, then it would be the exact same thing. If it was spend a shock, and for all of the round you have a +2 bonus to your melee defense, then it would be exactly the same as 2 weapons. But this is after the effect, after the thing has already been determined. This is like a last chance type thing to stay alive. So hopefully that clarifies. All these bonuses have already been dealt with. This is a new bonus getting introduced at this specific time by spending the shock. As an example, if we look at Cut to the Center, this is a prior to attacking. So this is prior to attacking. You spend a shock to gain a +2 to the attack, or spend 3 to apply 2 to both attack and damage. This is a prior, so this might not work with other bonuses depending on if those stack or not. But Staying Alive is after all those bonuses have already been dealt with. This is moving forward with a completely new type of thing. Hopefully that clarifies how to look at that. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was the very first technique, Break the Footfall. A lot of people read this and just say the hero can touch a surface or object. You can spend 2 shock to have your falling damage. What's that have to do with swords? And they get kind of stumped. Remember, Torg Eternity is based off of movies. It's cinematic, and part of that Pan-Pacifica themes, the genres that are wrapped up into it, you get a lot of things that are old martial art movies as well as anime type styles, and often in those you'll have, and in cinematic movies and that in general, you will see somebody use a dagger or a sword, and they will stick it in something and they will slide down. Common example that's not dealing with anime or martial arts would be back in the day, there were pirate and sailor type movies where the person would stick a dagger in the sail and kind of slide down the sail, breaking their fall. That's the type of visual that this is supposed to simulate, and that is shown in an actual image in the Pan Pacifica source book that you can look at, which is Break the Fall. So I just wanted to go over that. And then before we move into the second thing, the paths, they are intended to kind of focus a character's development and advancement. So they do get something every time they increase an add, they will get a new technique. Most of the techniques require shock expenditure, and a lot of the techniques are an expenditure of shock that mimics a perk, but if you get that perk, you can use that perk separately. You can combine them for a greater effect spending the shock, or if you don't have that perk, you can spend the shock and mimic that perk. So it is kind of something that where a lot of the perks and how they work are something that basically it's up to the player to figure out the synergies and their concepts that work well together for them. The path kind of directs you. So if you have a player that gets kind of paralysis analysis of trying to figure out what are all these perks that I need and I'm confused, Pan Pacifica, you can look at the vitality paths and kind of say, if you get too confused on that, here's a path, or here's an examples of paths that will tell you kind of what perks would work well with it, and then you can do your advancement based off of the path, as it is a path of life. It is what your character is focused on. So I just wanted to bring that up. That was one of the aspects of paths, character focus, as well as mimicking some of the martial art techniques from classic Torg. So having said that, also with Pan Pacifica, we have gear of serums, bioserums, that one of them is called Zing. Zing with an exclamation point at the end, or a bang at the end. And what this simply is once per scene, you can take it and it recovers a BD, a bonus die, +1 shock. Pretty good, especially if you're one of those martial art people that is spending lots of shock. Martial arts are going to want that second wind card that allows them to recover 5 shock by playing the card. Zing would be great for them to recover a BD +1 shock. Having people that have miracles and soothe and things like that would be very beneficial for them as well. But this is something that you could buy if you have 3,000 cash laying around, or have a requisition request with a persuasion of a 17. You could get that. Then we look at the perk. So the perk is Center Self. It's going to cost your XP depending on which order of perk you get, but it allows you to also recover once per scene as a simple action, recover 1 bonus die +1 shock. So the effect is kind of the same. A bonus die +1 of shock is recovered once per scene. Why would I ever get Center Self when Zing is available? Well, you have, again, the little niche situations that might occur. Maybe you fail your requisition roll, maybe you don't have the cash, etc. The Center Self is here as long as you get the fluff text of the beginning, which is the hero spends 30 minutes in quiet contemplation, and then for the rest of the day, once per scene, they could do this. Hopefully your game masters will allow you to have that time, unless it's something that's a really pressing thing where you have environmental conditions, such as the shock that doesn't go away after resting. But if you're allowing people to heal up all their shock and do that, this would be something as a game master I would just say, yeah, you have the 30 minutes to do it. Why not? Why not let the player, unless the adventure specifically calls for this not to happen. But again, Center Self does the exact same thing as Zing. Why would I want Center Self? Well, they're both once per scene, so there's nothing saying that you can't do both of these. Can't have Zing and Center Self. Yes, you can do both. So If you have a center self person, you can have a zing, you can use one, and then later you need to use it again, you use the other one and have doubles. So that is a thing also to consider when you're looking at gear that does something very similar to what a perk does. If they're once per scene, if they're once per act, those type of things, you get both, and then you can have that effect happen twice, which especially for these vitality, both the perks and the paths that require you to take shock to activate them, this is a great way to keep your shock reduced to a manageable level, and also something you as a player controls instead of having to have another player character do that soothe, do that miracle healing to reduce your shock. This is something that you can do by yourself. So basically that's the purpose of this. You could have zing, yes. You can have center self, yes, but nothing is preventing you from having both of them. So having said that, hopefully this kind of explains purpose of gear, purpose of perks, how they can synergize together, and don't just focus on the effect, focus on the whole shebang, the whole way that it's written. The first one was when does it happen? When does that bonus applied? Has it already been applied or something else already been applied? And this is an after the effect type thing, after the situation's kind of been determined and an extra boost added. Then they can work well together, or that is the reason why they're different, or in this case, is it a limited use and the other a limited use, so if one runs out, you can use the other one. So, once again, please email us at torgdcd@gmail.com. We'll read your email, we'll answer your questions, and having said that, once again, I am Leamon Crafton, line developer for Torg Eternity, and until next time, I hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.